So a little while back, well, when I say a little, I mean a long way back, I talked about my OC villains of my Stormhawk OC villains that I put in several stories. And some people I had to take the video down because I didn't want to get for reasons I didn't want to get I didn't want to get struck or anything, just to be safe. But I came back and just gonna talk about some villains and talk about some Reimagined villains that my good friend Jason Voorhees. Yeah, for those who don't know, he's currently working on a Stormhawks Transformers crossover on his fanfiction account. And he actually asked me, hey, can I use some of your villains that you created for this story? And I was like, yeah. So I'm going to talk about the original versions and the reimagined versions, which aren't that far apart, but yeah. Anyway, so let's talk about the first Stormhawks villain I created called Gideon. No, he is not inspired by Gideon Gleeful from Gravity Falls. He was actually created long before Gravity Falls was out. He actually was created then. Gideon is a Merb, same race as Stork, and he is this psychotic, think Mr. Sinister in Atmos. That's kind of what he was. He was this Merbian scientist who was kicked out of his home, his home Terra, and more or less exiled to the Black Gorge, where he got ripped apart, and he had to put himself back together with some metal parts. Eventually, he found his way to working with the Cyclonians, but even the Cyclonians were like, dude, you are fucked up, and locked him up. He was under the service of Master Cyclonus' grandmother. Then Master Cyclonus let him out to help with these things called the Black Chapter Files, which are more or less these files that are basically like these forbidden things that that Gideon did for the previous Master Cyclonus, and what she did with them. What he worked with her, and it went from cloning to cybernetics to robotics to genetic engineering to basically think everything that everything wrong you could do wrong with science, and yeah, yeah. He was part of that. So Gideon, under Master Cyclonus' guidance, more or less created some horrible things for Master Cyclonus to have fun with. From clones to robotics to cyborgs, all kinds of stuff. So Gideon was kind of like the first villain I created for that. Then came General Thrall. Thrall was a raptor, same as Repton. In fact, he was a general in his army, and the two kind of pretty much had a Starscream Megatron relationship, where Thrall, even though he was loyal to the crown, he didn't really like Repton because he served his father, very loyally, but when Repton took the throne, Repton made some very interesting changes, obviously joining with Cyclonia. He wanted to be more basic. He was a very hard-set isolationist. I kind of had it in my headcanon that Bogotan is kind of like Atmos' Wakanda, where it had no contact with the outside world, and no one's ever conquered that conquered that Terra for generations, and then Repton kind of changed everything. Yeah. So Thrall and Repton did not get along for the longest time, and the final nail of the coffin was that Repton started to have feelings for Starling after besting him in battle in the events of Absolute Power, and Repton was so just enamored by her that he wanted her to be his queen. So he wanted her as his wife, and for Thrall, that was like, oh, hell no, there's no way we are going to let an outsider, let alone a human outsider, rule us. So he overthrew Repton, kicked him out of the Terra, and for a while he ruled until Repton came back and proceeded to kill his ass. So let's talk about the reimagined versions of Thrall and Gideon in this new, in the new Stormhawks Transformers crossover. By Jason. They're pretty much the same. They're more or less the same as they were. There's no real big changes other than Thrall is a little more... You see, Thrall was in my version, Thrall was a little more... He was very cunning, but he was arrogant as well. And here, Thrall's more or less a chess master in this series. Gideon's a little more psychotic, and rather than, he was locked up for a while after spending some time in the Black Gorge. So those are really the only big changes, and he's just a little more crazier. Anyway. So moving on is the Cyberhawks. Now the Cyberhawks have a very interesting background to them. Because basically what it was that in the stories I wrote for a while, what happened, I'm trying not to say basically so many times, it's like my mind's going on repeat. But with them, the story was that in that continuity, Junko was killed by Master Cyclonus while trying to stop a super weapon from being detonated in Atmos. And Cyclonus ordered Gideon to clone Junko, but he didn't really have enough DNA material to get it all the way through. So he added some cybernetic parts and had this Cyber Junko work for her until eventually Cyclonus managed to get more DNA samples of the other Stormhawks and thus created the Cyberhawks, which are cybernetic clones of the Stormhawks. Think of them like they were like the Psycho Rangers from Power Rangers in Space. Well, Power Rangers Lost Galaxy, excuse me. But yeah, they were pretty much like the Psycho Rangers. They had a lot of the personality of the original Stormhawks, but they were a little more aggressive and psychotic. And the Cyber Arrow was he was just a straight up bastard. But yeah, he was kind of like, I know I kind of compared them to the Psycho Rangers, but the cybernetic clone of Arrow was a lot like Thalog from Gargoyles. That's the best way I could describe. He was pretty much a lot like Thalog. He was devious, he was very hard to control, and he more or less kept the other Cyberhawks under his thumb, out of fear of him killing the others. Because he pretty much says, he pretty much told the Cyberhawks straight up, hey, I can just kill you and clone another one. A more obedient one, so shut the fuck up. Yeah. Are the Cyberhawks going to show up in this new crossover universe by Jason? I'm not saying a word. Yeah. Anyway. What else was it? What are the other major villains I really want to talk about? Oh! Raven and Crow. They're pretty much the same character, more or less. Raven and Crow are pretty much the same character, just little different backgrounds in different continuities of stories. Sometimes I'll take a character and reinvent them, and that's kind of the case with Raven and Crow. You see, Raven, in the first time around, was created as a genetic clone made from Cyclonus and Arrow's DNA, made by Gideon, and he was like this. He was meant to be the replacement for Dark Ace, and he was pretty good too. I mean, he had Cyclonus's just intelligence and savagery mixed with Arrow's skill, and that was a deadly combination. Crow was kind of like the same way, but Crow was the genetically cloned, child of Piper and Cyclonus. Cyclonus wanted a perfect heir for Cyclonia, and she believed, if Piper wasn't going to be her successor, she was going to have Cyclonus. So Crow was created to be that successor. And Crow was basically, in a sense, yeah, Piper and Cyclonus were her mother, Crow, his Crow. Yeah, Crow's a boy, were his mothers. Yeah, and it was always brought up too that Piper pretty much had a son with Cyclonus, even though through cloning, and they were kind of Crow would be like, oh god, I'm stuck between my moms are fighting again. Great, but yeah, that was the thing, was that Crow didn't really give a shit about there was the problem. Crow was he was so genetically modified, and so his genetics acceleration happened. He was straight created to being a teenager, and all of that ensued. The teenage angst and everything. And even though he was raised by Cyclonians, he had this very much I don't care kind of personality to him. He was very much like Gaz. You know, all this responsibility, and all he wants to do is play video games and ignore his mother. So that was with Crow. Raven, like I said, was meant to be Dark Ace's successor, not so much successor to the throne. So that was the thing with him, and then and this was during the Sky Knight Academy series I was writing for a while until I got rid of all those stories. Sky Knight Academy, in there, Arrow and Piper got together and they had children. And Theo, and they had a daughter too. Theo and Raven was kind of like their, it was in a sense, he was like Theo's half brother and Arrow's biological child, even though it was created from his DNA. It was kind of like the same thing with Superman and Superboy, where it was kind of looked at that. So that was the thing right there with Raven. So that's Raven and Crow, more or less. Will they be in the Stormhawks Transformers story? Maybe, maybe not. We haven't really discussed those characters yet. Jason and I, really. So we haven't really talked about those characters in particular. But yeah, what were some other characters that I wanted to talk about? What are some other characters I really wanted to chat up on? Oh yeah, Quinton Flintlock. Quinton Flintlock was he was more or less Hondo from Clone Wars in the Stormhawks universe. Quinton Flintlock was this smuggler / pirate, and he was kind of an asshole, but he was an asshole with a code. And he always wanted to sleep with Piper. Even though Quinton was like in his late 20s, early 30s, and he was just like, God, I want to just hit that so hard, that tight little 14-year-old so hard. Why do you want to punch Piper? And Finn would be like, why do you want to punch Piper? Oh, I'm going to punch her with something hard. Yeah, as you can tell, he was just very chauvinistic, Whenever he sees a girl, whenever he sees jailbait, more or less, he goes from zero to I want to fuck it. Yeah, he had a thing for like younger girls, because he didn't want to admit to himself that he was going through a midlife crisis, and he was just this chauvinistic asshole. I mean, he did some horrible things, but at the same time, he would help the Stormhawks and help the Cyclonians, and he would always just again hit on Piper whenever he got the chance. Anyway. So there's Quinton Flintlock. Then we have the God Machine. Oh boy, the God Machine. The God Machine kind of went under some renovations a few times over. But more or less the thing stayed the same. The God Machine was this giant living computer, and it helped create thousands, if not millions. The thing is that no one really knew in Atmos how old the God Machine was, and it more or less helped create life on Atmos. And it kind of thought to itself, well, this thing I created is kind of useless now. It's stupid. I'm going to get rid of it and start a new life. Start over again. Yeah, kind of. It just wanted to new 52 everything. And the Sky Knights and Cyclonians had to team up against the God Machine and its new creations. What did I call them? What did I call the new creations? The Biotopians. That's what I called them, the Biotopians. Which were these synthetic, these living synthetic unified mind creatures. Yeah. So yeah, the Biotopians. I just love the name of that, the Biotopians. So yeah, there you go. The God Machine and its creations, the Biotopians.